The rain had not stopped since morning, and somewhere between the gray sky and the wet street below, Arman Malik was standing at the entrance of his workshop holding a cup of tea he had forgotten to drink. He was not a man who stood still often. 39 years old, a small restoration workshop on the edge of Rawalpindi, 2 service bays, a hydraulic lift that groaned every time it rose, and a framed photograph on the shelf near the back wall, a cobblestone street outside Turin, pale morning light, a narrow workshop door half open that he had never once explained to anyone who asked. Most people assumed it was decorative. It was not. It was a reminder of the version of his life that had existed before everything changed, before Zara, before Sami, before the particular kind of silence that follows a loss you never fully prepare for. His phone rang at 7:42. 6 specialists, private collection, Lahore. The owner prepared to pay whatever was required. He wrote the address on the back of a receipt, called his neighbor Mrs. Perveen to sit with his 9-year-old son Sami after school, and by 9 o'clock he was driving north through the rain, telling himself it was just another job. He was wrong. Sami had been 2 years old when his mother died. Arman remembered the morning with the particular sharpness of memories that arrive without warning and stay without permission. The hospital corridor, the white ceiling tiles, the doctor's voice saying words that rearranged the entire architecture of his future in under a minute. He had driven home that night to a sleeping 2-year-old who would never remember his mother's voice, and he had sat beside the small bed for a long time without moving, watching Sami breathe, making a silent promise to a boy who didn't yet know what had been lost. He had kept that promise every day since, not loudly, not with speeches or declarations, quietly, consistently, the way a man builds something he intends to last. He packed Sami's school bag the night before, so mornings were calm. He kept the workshop close to home so he was never far. He learned to cook 4 things well and rotated them with the patience of someone who understood that stability, for a child, lives in small repetitions. He had not dated. He had not looked. He had carried the weight of 2 people's love inside one life and called it enough, because most days it was. The gallery sat behind iron gates and a long gravel driveway lined with eucalyptus trees bending in the October wind. White stone floors, soft, deliberate lighting, 4 cars beneath the ceiling glow like sculptures in a place where beautiful things are preserved and admired. 3 of them Arman noted with professional respect and moved past. The 4th sat apart near the far wall beneath a silver dust sheet not properly secured at the corners. That one was waiting. He could sense it before he reached it, the way a doctor senses illness before any test confirms it. He was 20 feet away when he heard the laugh. Clear and unhurried, it came from a woman in her mid-30s near the rear of the gallery, speaking with 3 employees who kept a respectful distance around her. Dark blazer, small earrings, a tablet held loosely at her side. Her name was Nadia Rehan. She ran a regional logistics company with 400 employees and a reputation for solving problems other people abandoned. She had been divorced for 3 years. She did not discuss it. She had learned, the way certain people learn certain things, that some losses are carried in silence, not because they are shameful, but because they belong to a part of yourself too real for casual conversation. She had also lost her mother 2 years earlier, a woman who collected beautiful and unexplainable things, whose entire collection Nadia had only begun to understand after she was gone. This car had been part of that collection. Nadia had kept it because letting it go felt like erasing the last sentence of a letter she hadn't finished reading. "If you can actually fix this thing," she said, gesturing toward the covered car with easy authority, "I might have to marry you." Her employees laughed. Arman glanced at her, nodded once with the quiet neutrality of a man who has heard all kinds of things from clients, and walked to the car. He pulled back the dust sheet. 6 specialists had failed. He was the 7th, and the moment his fingers found the small hand-machined aluminum bracket hidden behind a cluster of hoses in the engine bay, beveled at one corner, engraved near its base with letters no larger than a fingernail, MB5, he did not move for a long moment. Both hands rested on the edge of the engine bay, and the sounds of the gallery, the quiet conversation behind him, the distant rain against the glass, pulled back like a tide going out, leaving only silence and 2 letters and 1 number that nobody else in that bright room would have recognized. MB5. Marco Bellini, Component 5. He had helped build Component 3 himself on a Tuesday afternoon in a workshop outside Turin while rain fell against tall warehouse windows, and Marco stood beside him explaining, in that patient, unhurried voice that never rose and never rushed, why a hand-machined bracket would always outlast a factory casting if the craftsman understood the stress distribution at the mounting point. That was 15 years ago. Marco had been gone for 11. And this car, through every collector and continent and changing hand, had carried one of the old master's hidden marks all the way here without anyone knowing what it held. Arman felt something move in his chest that he did not immediately have a name for. It was not quite grief. It was not quite joy. It was the particular feeling of being found by something you thought was permanently behind you. "Did you find something?" Nadia's voice came from just behind him. "Maybe." "What kind of maybe?" "The kind," he said, "that turns a repair job into a very long story." She studied him carefully. "Should I be worried?" He looked at the car. "No, but I need to go home first." Sami was at the kitchen table when he arrived, a bowl of noodles half-eaten, math workbook open, a pencil balanced behind his ear the exact way Arman sometimes kept one. The boy had his mother's eyes, wide and brown and completely direct. And in that moment, the way he looked up from his homework with simple, uncalculated trust, Arman felt Zara the way he always felt her in Sami, present, irreplaceable, continuing. He stood in the doorway for just a second longer than necessary. Some days the carrying weight was heavier than others. This was one of those days. Not because it crushed him, because it reminded him that everything he had built since that hospital corridor, the quiet mornings, the packed school bags, the 4 meals he cooked well, had been built for this boy and this boy alone. And that was not a small thing. That was everything. "How was the car?" Sami asked. "Strange," Arman said. "Strange good or strange bad?" "Strange, like something from a long time ago came back." Sami set his pencil down. "Did it make you sad?" "A little," Arman said honestly. "But I think it made me something else too. I'm still figuring out what." He went upstairs to the locked cabinet in the corner of the office and opened it for the first time in years. 3 composition notebooks, cloth yellowed at the edges, handwriting dense and slanted, and full of diagrams and measurements that read more like philosophy than mechanics. Marco Bellini had never separated the technical from the personal. Every machine, he believed, carried the intention of its maker, and understanding that intention was more important than understanding any individual component. He had passed this belief to Arman across 4 years of patient mentorship, and Arman had carried it across 2 countries and a decade without always knowing how necessary it would one day remain. He read through the night. Sami fell asleep in the office couch at 9 and Arman covered him with a blanket without stopping. By midnight, he had found it. A full page of notes from 1987 describing a deliberate ignition timing deviation built into this model during a limited production run, an intentional engineering decision that every subsequent technician had misread as a fault. The correction required 3 components retuned together in precise sequence as a system, not individually. At the bottom of the page, in marginally looser handwriting, Marco had written, "Every machine carries its original intention. Your job is not to override it. Your job is to hear it." Arman sat for a long time in the quiet office after reading that line, his sleeping son nearby, the rain still tapping at the window. Marco's voice coming back across 11 years as clearly as if the man were sitting across the desk. He thought about intention, original, buried, patient intention, and he thought about his own, the version of himself that had stood in that Turin workshop believing the whole world was cobblestone streets and rare engines and long afternoons of learning, the version of himself that had driven home to a sleeping 2-year-old and made a promise he kept every single day afterward. Both of those men were real. Both were him. And perhaps, he thought, the chapters of a life do not cancel each other. Perhaps they accumulate the way knowledge accumulates, layer by layer, until the man you are is built from everything you survived and everything you chose. He returned to Lahore 3 days later with the notebooks, the calibration tools, the sourced parts. Nadia was there when he arrived, standing by the car with a coffee cup, looking like someone who had not been entirely certain he would come back. He worked through most of the afternoon without unnecessary conversation. Around 3 o'clock, she brought him tea without being asked, set it near the engine bay, and sat down on a low stool a short distance away. "You're not like the others," she said. He tightened a fitting before answering. "The others were trying to fix what they saw. I'm fixing what someone built." "Is there a difference?" "Always." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "How do you know this car the way you know it?" He told her about Marco. Not everything, not the full texture of those Italian afternoons, or the particular quality of the light in that high warehouse, or the way Marco could explain the soul of a machine the way other men explain weather. But enough. He told her about the bracket, he told her about the notebook, and as he spoke, he watched her expression move, from the careful professional attention of a woman managing a contractor to something quieter, something she was not performing. The expression of a person being reached by a story they had not prepared themselves for. When he finished, she looked at the car for a long moment before speaking. "My mother bought this car 20 years ago," she said. "She never told me why. She collected things she loved without explaining them. When she was gone, I started going through everything she had kept, and I realized I had spent her whole life not asking the right questions." Her voice was steady in the way of someone who has said a true thing many times until the saying of it no longer breaks them, but the truth of it never stops being true. "I kept the car because I thought if I could understand what she loved about it, I would understand something about her I missed while she was here." Arman looked at her then, fully, unhurriedly, the way Marco had taught him to look at things he did not yet understand. "I think," he said carefully, "that you just did." When the engine finally turned over late that afternoon, with the gallery light going amber and gold, it did not roar. It settled, deeply, evenly, without hurry, into a low, steady hum that filled the room the way a held breath fills a chest before it is finally released. Nadia stood with both hands over her mouth. Arman let it run for a full minute, listening not for faults, but for wholeness, the way Marco had taught him to listen. "It's right," he said. She looked at him with eyes that were bright and unguarded. "It's perfect." A pause. Then her voice returning with the warmth of someone reclaiming something that had quietly become more than it started as. "I did say something about marriage." Arman laughed, genuinely, unguardedly, the kind of laugh that surprised him on its way out. "You did." "I was joking. I know." The silence between them was honest and unhurried. "Were you?" she asked. He looked at her for a long moment. Outside, the eucalyptus trees were dark silhouettes against a pale amber sky. Somewhere in Rawalpindi, Sami was at Mrs. Perveen's table with a pencil behind his ear. Marco's bracket was warm from a running engine. "I came here to fix a car. Whatever else happens is a different story." She smiled slowly. "Maybe it's a story worth telling." "Maybe," he said. "It already is." He closed the hood with both hands, gently, the way you close something you respect. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday with cold, clean air and pale winter sunlight, Nadia came to Mexico. She said she was donating books to a nearby school and needed directions. She was, almost certainly, not entirely telling the truth about the directions. Arman made tea. Sami came downstairs in a yellow sweater and looked at her with those wide, direct eyes and said, with the complete honesty that belongs only to children, "Are you the lady from the car?" Arman looked at Nadia. Arman looked briefly at the ceiling. "Yes," she said, crouching to the boy's level. "I am the lady from the car." Sami considered this with great seriousness. Then he said, He fixed it. He fixes everything. And Nadia, who had not cried in front of another person in over 2 years, pressed her lips together and looked away at the framed photograph on the workshop shelf, the cobblestone street outside Turin, the pale morning light, the half-open door, and breathed very carefully until she was steady again. That was the moment. Not the engine, not the bracket, not the joke that became something real, or the amber light in the gallery, or the quiet exchange beside a running car. It was a 9-year-old boy in a yellow sweater delivering 4 words with absolute and uncalculated faith, and a woman remembering what it felt like to stand in a room where someone believed in something that completely. Arman drove home that evening through the first cold of winter, Sammy asleep against the window, and thought about how a life holds more chapters than you can see from inside any single one. He thought about Marco, who built carefully and left marks only the right hands would ever find. He thought about Zara, whom he would never stop loving, and about how love does not divide when it expands, it deepens, the way a river deepens when it widens. He thought about a woman who had kept a car to understand her mother and had found instead something she had stopped expecting. And he thought about intention, the original patient intention of things built honestly and built to last, and how sometimes the most important repairs in a life have nothing to do with machines. He drove slowly. The road was clear. The boy was sleeping. And somewhere ahead, quiet and unhurried as everything that matters, the next chapter was already beginning without announcement, the way all the real ones do. If this story held something in your chest and didn't let go, you belong here. Subscribe to the Kind Soul Stories right now, because every single week we bring you stories about ordinary people carrying extraordinary hearts. Ring the bell so you never miss one, and leave a comment below. Tell us about someone in your life who fixes things quietly, without asking to be seen. This community was built on kindness, and kindness, as Arman Malik would tell you, is never a small thing. What is the significant educational and human value in this story? This story teaches that mastery is quiet and patient. The greatest craftsmen leave invisible marks that only the worthy will find. It honors mentorship across time, showing that a teacher's influence does not end at death, but travels forward through every hand they shaped. It shows that single parenthood is not a diminished life, but a life of full and extraordinary devotion. It teaches, through Sammy, that a child's faith in a parent is one of the most powerful forces in the world. And it reminds every person watching that the most important repairs we make in this life have nothing to do with machines.